Welcome to Virtually Amazing Assistants, the podcast for assistants everywhere. If you've not met me before, my name is Shelley Fishel. I'm known as the MS Office Maestro, and I've been training assistants, business owners, organizations for over 25 years on Microsoft Office applications, and I still do that. However, I have a passion for assistants. I think you're all amazing. Businesses wouldn't work without you. And I've created this podcast for assistants everywhere. Over the coming weeks, I'm going to be chatting each week with a different guest expert. We'll find out how they got to where they are, what they're up to now, and how they can help you. Tips and tricks abundant. We will learn loads. So that's me, Shelley Fishel. Enough of this introduction. In a moment, I'll be bringing on my guest. Welcome to this week's episode of Virtually Amazing Assistants, the podcast for assistants everywhere. And I'm really delighted to have Kathy Soulsby with me on the podcast this week. Kathy was one of my guests on the original Virtually Amazing podcast. And just a brief introduction to Kathy, which I hope I'll get right, but I'm sure Kathy will correct me at the end if I haven't. And I've got a crib sheet here, so it might sound like I'm reading it, but I'm trying not to read it because I hate scripts. So Kathy started with a really varied career. She's done lots of things. She's been a restaurant manager, a customer relations executive. She's been an exporter of shellfish, and of course, a PA before she set up Personally Virtual in 2014. Wow, 10 years, Kathy. That's 10
in
years this year.
October. Yeah.
Personally Virtual has grown to become a renowned team of personal assistants and virtual assistants who work with a variety of clients, from small one-man bands right the way up to some well-known brands. And Kathy has authored 2 books, Virtually Painless, which we can talk about in a minute because I love the story behind that, and How to Work with a Virtual Assistant. For the other side of the coin, people like me who need a virtual assistant, what can I do to make life with my virtual assistant go as well as it can be? Kathy is also the host of a podcast called Productivity Nerd, because like me, you like a bit of the old tech. And we're always on the lookout for the best tech to make our lives easier. So have I missed anything?
I don't think so. That is a pretty good coverage of me and my life. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So I've got some questions because Kathy and I met, we were talking about it before we started recording. We think we were orbiting each other on Facebook. I like that word, Kathy. It was a good word you chose. Orbiting each other on Facebook for a while in various assistance groups. And also my friend and previous co-host Joe Brianti and Kathy have known each other a long time, and they both have dogs. And there were lots of dog stories on Facebook that I used to roll off my chair laughing about, especially your dog, Kathy, because she does quite amazing things. And then we were introduced to each other and we met. I don't know if we've met actually in person, maybe once at the PA show.
Yes,
possibly.
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think I have seen you in person, but where that was, I couldn't tell you.
It would probably have been the PA show. And so that's how we connected. So it's all about networking. And in other episodes, you'll have heard me talk about the importance of networking. And it just goes to show it's really important because it's not always about work and money. Sometimes it's about knowledge and sharing and working with each other and how we can all help each other. So I'm really interested in people's journeys and how they got to where they got, how they got to their expert status. And that's, I know what my listeners, because they've told me, that's what they like to hear. And I don't want Kathy to have to go through her whole life history with all the things she's done. For that, you can go and listen to Virtually Amazing, the podcast for virtual assistants, which you can find on my website or on your favorite podcast player, and find Kathy's episode because she talks all about it there and it's still available. This is just a new show. So, Kathy, I wanted to find out, because you started out as a solo virtual assistant, how did you grow to a team? When did you first realize that you were going to need to manage a team?
It came upon me somewhat by accident. When I first set up, I didn't necessarily intend to build a team. If you'd have told me 10 years ago what my life would look like now, I would have cried laughing. I'm no Richard Branson, for sure. And I took on my first associate when somebody got in touch through my little local village newsletter, where I put an advert almost as I almost considered it a charity donation to keep the newsletter running, rather than
Yeah.
ever expecting that my little village would even know what a virtual assistant was, to be honest. But this chap came through. Obviously, I didn't know him from a bar of soap. I was fully booked. So I thought, this is the perfect opportunity. It's really low risk. He's not part of my network. It's very left field. I will find an associate, put them on this job, and see. And that went absolutely fine. And because he didn't know me personally, there was none of that really angsty, oh, what do you mean you're not doing the work? Which, when you first make that transition from me to we, is really itchy and unpleasant. So there was none of that. And then, not maybe a year after that, I think, an existing contact of mine got in touch for some VA work, and I was up to my eyes myself. And I knew that they were busy because I knew them from working with them as an employee 100 years ago. So I went to my VA network, which I've always been pretty good at building, and just went, anybody got any experience with management consultancies? Fancies a bit of a corporate gig? Put one person on that who was amazing. She's still there now. We added another one because it got very busy. And then I think it was probably about 5 months later, it was just before Christmas, the client came to us and said, look, we're having a bit of an internal rejig. We're going to need a lot more support because our internal team are moving out of being EAs and into other roles in the business. Can we talk about more support? So we did the very professional grown-up thing. Kind of, yes, and we'll work that out. We'll work out how much resource we need. Blah, blah, blah. I think we'll work it out. It's probably an extra 5 people, maybe 6. Yeah, we'll leave it with us. And then both of us got off the phone, rang each other back up, and screamed at each other for about 10 minutes, I think. And from there, you discover the art of the possible and go, wow, okay, it is possible to work for bigger companies, to have a team of VAs that work together very much like a team of EAs would in a bigger business. We cover each other's holiday. We talk together on Slack every day. And it built from there. So I now have 4 clients where we have a multiple VA team looking after them. That original one is still the biggest by a couple of VAs, but there are others with 6, 8, and 4 on, I think. And they've gone up and down over the years, depending on how busy we are. But I think the most it's ever been is 16.
Wow, that is amazing. So, how much of your time is taken up managing all of that?
All of it now. I have one client that is my longest standing client. I can't say oldest, although he probably is. My longest standing client, who I still look after. He's really minimal. He takes me about 8 hours a month, something like that. And the rest of the time I now work on the business. So that's managing the team, finding new team members, a lot of business development, a lot of marketing, and which isn't to say I do it all on my own. I have people that work with me on the business as well as me. But yeah, I don't have the capacity to do client work anymore. It's too tying as much as anything. I think because we focus very heavily on diary management, call ourselves diary ninjas, being the only salesperson in the business, I have to be able to go, drop everything, go and have a day in London. Next week, I'm off to Dublin for the day to meet a client. And that's really hard to do when you're managing a diary, to get someone in to cover. You're just not there to pick things up. So it's actually a lot easier for me not to do client work. It means that I've got more capacity to go out and find the new work.
That's great. I had to mute myself. I was about to cough all over the microphone.
Oh, no.
Because I remember when we talked last time, you were saying you were spending at that time, about 5 hours a day, because this was probably 4 or 5 years ago now,
Yeah.
when we did the podcast 2020, 2021. So that's 3 years ago. So you were saying then, and you were finding it really was ramping up. Very exciting. Very exciting. So what made you, changing the subject slightly, what made you write Virtually Painless, the first book?
I was a bit bored, Shelley. I know that sounds awful. So when I first set up as a virtual assistant, what I found was that although I was really busy and the VA work of finding the clients, marketing, invoicing, all that kept me very busy. The actual work itself that I was picking up wasn't anywhere near as challenging as my old job.
Yeah.
It just wasn't straining my brain very much. And I think when you first start a business, you do pick up work that isn't necessarily your ideal work. And certainly I started alongside my actual job. Therefore, the work I did had to be able to be done in the evenings and weekends. Oh my goodness, I did so much scanning, so much data entry, and it was so mind-numbingly
Yeah.
dull. And I got rid of a lot of that once I went full time. But still, there wasn't quite enough meat on the bone to keep me interested. And I was writing a series of blogs just for fun, really, about what it's like being a virtual assistant. And I used to talk to quite a few people about being a virtual assistant. And that still happens now, beauty of networking. And I love it. And I don't think I've ever said no to talking to anybody about being a VA if they're interested. Because people, oh, you should talk to Kathy, she's a VA. If you're thinking about it as a PA, go and have a chat to Kathy. And I pretty much will talk to anybody. But I had so many of these calls, I feel like I'm saying the same thing again and again. And I thought, I'll write it into a book. So Virtually Painless was born, and it's a very informal book. It's quite short. You can read it, as people have told me. Don't read it on a train because you'll laugh out loud and look like a lunatic. But you can absolutely read it on a sun lounger. It's not a hard read. There is some swearing in there, I will tell you now. Quite a lot of gin and quite a lot of naughty dogs. So it's the fun look. But if you read it from start to finish, you would absolutely know how to start a VA business. The bones are there. The sensible information is there. It's just cunningly concealed in a layer of daft anecdotes, really.
No, but that's the best way to learn, isn't it? Through stories and fun anyway. So that's great. And then, of course, the second book and the podcast. So what was the motivation for those? Was that boredom again?
No, that was a really foolish conversation with my business mentor, actually. And the first book came about as a result of a day's coaching when I was saying, I'm really busy and I'm really tired, but I'm also bored and I don't know how that works. So the second book, I've been mulling on for years and years as a result of having lots of conversations with prospective clients. And I talk to a lot of prospective clients, and many of them I will say, we're not the right fit for you for whatever reason. Some of them I will say, you need a full time EA. This is the role you are talking about is not a VA role, it won't work. And sometimes it's, you need to go find a marketing expert or you need to go find a podcast expert. Yet people think that a VA, there are so many myths and legends around VAs.
Yeah.
You know, we're a 24/7 call center. Nobody gets a response from me after 5:30 ever, unless a limb has been hacked off. So there's lots of myths, and people think, oh, VAs can do everything and they're going to do it really cheap and it's going to be amazing. So cost effective, yes. Cheap, no. By all means, go cheap, but don't expect somebody who's at an EA level, would be City of London, earning 80k a year to rock up and work for you for 15 quid an hour. That's just
Not
not
going to happen.
realistic. No, there are PAs out there earning maybe 25k who are on the junior side, and you may get a VA equivalent who is just good at admin, but is perhaps relatively new to the world of administration. So you pick where but I think a lot of people had this notion that VAs are super cheap and they're going to run their lives for them and cost them 20 quid a month,
Yeah.
which is clearly
Yeah.
not realistic. So
I
it was,
I find I get really cross when I see adverts on LinkedIn or Facebook for these people advertising. You can have a VA and it'll only cost you like $10 an hour. When you can almost not buy a loaf of bread these days for
no.
that. Why would anybody work for that low
No,
amount of
well,
money?
no, and overseas VAs, obviously their cost of living is much lower, but you have to balance that with the lovely Annabelle Kay from Coffee Clatch, who is up on all the law
Yeah.
related things. She did a chapter in my book, and it's a major risk factor outsourcing overseas because with the lower level of the market, people share laptops. There could be anything on that if they're
Yeah.
switching it between people working shifts, don't necessarily know how great their Wi-Fi is. There's multiple reasons, and there's absolutely a place for people working down the lower end of the price scale. I'm not saying everybody needs to be expensive at all, but certainly in the UK, there's a level at which if you're paying for your own insurance, you're paying for decent IT equipment, you've got proper business level subscriptions to Microsoft and etc.
Yeah.
you can't be doing it properly if you're doing it that cheap. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not safe.
Yeah. No, I totally mean that. And Annabelle has, in fact, I was recording with Annabelle yesterday, and her
Ah,
episode is probably going out before yours, but I can't remember what order
oh,
I've put them in.
perfect.
So I've been very lucky for this iteration of the podcast. I've got 23 people who
Goodness.
wanted to come on it, and I've got all of those scheduled over the course of about 4 weeks to get them all recorded and scheduled. So I'm quite busy recording at the moment.
Yeah, I should think you're going to be quite tired and probably not have any voice left by Christmas.
No, it's fine. I'm not doing most of the talking. That's the beauty of it. My
There
guests are
is
doing
that.
all the talking. So
Yes.
that's great.
Yes.
So let's go back to the podcast because I'm intrigued. I have to admit that I didn't know you had a podcast
Yeah.
until I went and found it. And I've listened to one episode because I just ran out of time. It's really cool. So why did you start it? Is it monthly, weekly, bi-weekly, when you
So
like it?
it's fortnightly, and there is a pattern. And it's slightly under the radar at the moment. I post about it, but my general theory with anything like that is it needs a year or two to get bedded in and get some traction. Oh, excuse me. So it came about because everybody to do with marketing kept telling me to do videos, and I hate videos, Shelley. I hate them. I have this ability to talk on video when I'm talking to you now, like a normal person. The minute anybody tells me that video is going out live as a video, I will start gurning. It's just horrible. Podcast felt like a brilliant idea because it's audio only. Hurrah! I've always been a massive productivity nerd. I listen to other podcasts on productivity. I use a planner that I import from the States because it's taken me so long to find one that is perfect. And I will be very unproductive by spending a lot of time trying a new thing to see if it makes me more productive. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
it totally makes sense.
Horrific habits to get into, hence the planner, because I will not let myself go off down the shiny new thing of a new planner ever now because I have one that works. But for many years, it was like, oh, new planner, great. And you waste hours of your life watching videos on how to be more productive and go, actually, I could have been a lot more productive if I just hadn't watched
Watch
the
the
videos.
video.
So yeah, it mixes up. So it's either a guest interview with somebody. I might get you on to talk about productivity in Microsoft because we already had a little geek about that earlier. And it would be nice to get an expert on that. I might hit you up for that. So we either had a guest who has a particular niche interest in something productivity related, or I will read a productivity book and myself and the lovely Claire Enion will talk about it. I can't remember the most recent one that was released, but the most recent one we recorded was Cal Newport's Slow Productivity. We'll talk about it. I'll explain it to her, so I'm therefore explaining it to the listener as a
Yeah.
kind of, this is what the book's about. This is, do we think this would work in real life? Do we agree? So we do that. Occasionally Helen, my ops VA, and I will do one about a particular topic or a particular book as well. And we alternate those. And then in between, I do a mini pod. So that could be 2 to 5 minutes of me talking about something like, let's say, quick steps in Outlook, or other ones have I done? Time blocking. So either a technique or a little
Or
tech, just a real quick, almost like a blog, but in super fast podcast form. So something comes out, I think from Christmas, it's going to be every week. At the moment, it's every 2 weeks, but we've decided that we can up it. So there'll be something coming out every week from January onwards, whether that's a mini pod or a longer one. But yeah,
and a
but I love
silly
it.
question, but I suppose you have a plan for it.
A plan for the podcast?
Yeah.
Ish. I certainly have a hit list of people I would like to get on it, but it was very definitely a let's just do it, get better at it, because it's funny,
Yeah.
you've been a podcast host before, you've had practice how to make it work. I did not have that. So I had to learn how to interview people, how to keep to time. It's much easier with Claire because she and I just get together and just talk like a bunch of old. Her husband actually at one point went, "Oh my God, there's so much cackling." So I'm really sorry. We are, believe it or not, recording a podcast. So we have a lot of fun on those ones, as well as it being quite educational.
Yeah.
But the guest ones, it's getting the best out of them and their particular niche. And everybody thinks of productivity as a different thing, which is in itself fascinating because Is it doing more? Is it doing less? Because sometimes it's doing less, but doing the right things. I find it really interesting.
That's yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. What can you, starting to wrap up, have you got any tips or lessons or advice for our listeners? Bearing in mind that they may be VAs at any stage of their journey, but they may also be corporate PAs and EAs. And they may be very happy where they are, but they may be considering or in the back of their mind thinking about jumping ship and going alone and being an entrepreneur with all that brings. Because it's always fascinating to me that VAs are actually business owners. They're not just administrators. And the word just shouldn't be in there at all. They're not only administrators.
Yes. Yeah. But it's a really hard leap to make, actually. I called myself, oh, I'm just a PA for years, years and years. It's a very tricky one to get out of. And I think because it's a support role, it's particularly challenging, perhaps compared to being a freelance writer or a freelance marketeer, because you are being given tasks by somebody. That balance of remembering you're a business owner and that it's a partnership, it's not an employee employer relationship, is quite tricky to get your head around at certain points. So I would say, in terms of, given that we're talking about productivity, I would say in terms of organizing your day, I think most people could do with turning off notifications and giving themselves, ideally two, maybe one, depending on your role, hours of deep focused work a day if you can. And if you're running a business, I used to always do 11 till 1, still do most days, 11 to 1 working on my business, notifications off. I have my inbox paused on Boomerang. So if I know there's something I'm expecting, I can keep an eye out for that, but nothing else is going to interrupt me. And I do work out of my inbox sometimes, rarely. So I can still see them, but they're just, people who are more night owls might find that 3, 4 o'clock is their best
Yeah.
time to really do the difficult stuff. Even in a PA role where you are employed, I'm pretty sure most people can manage an hour without needing you. And if it's that bad, somebody will zap you or send a pigeon or
If you're on the
so.
shoulder.
Yeah, whatever it may be. But I think that just carving out some time when you're not at everybody else's beck and call is really important. We have so many notifications. Now, I don't do client work. I still have 3 different clients on Teams plus my own. I have 5 different Slack groups that I'm part of, plus people WhatsApp me, and I'm in some WhatsApp groups related to work. And all of that can just feel like an awful lot of noise, and it can make you quite anxious and quite stressy, even when there's nothing in any of those notifications that should inspire stress.
Yes.
It's just the dinging and the, oh, that could be important. You don't know, it could be a crisis. If you turn off the notifications and you actively go and look for them, it makes life much more sane and you can actually get some work done.
Yeah, I love that because when I teach Outlook, one of the first things I usually talk about is turning off all the notifications and the dinging. I can't bear the noise when it pings. Not only does it pop up a banner like in your face, it also makes a noise. So my husband works in the dining room here. We live in an apartment. I haven't. The spare room is my office, and he works the dining room table. He's an accountant, and he is still working part time, and he likes notifications. So he'll get a notification pop up. There'll be a ding. It'll pop up on his phone. If his iPad's next to him, it'll pop up on there. And so it makes me really anxious when I'm hearing it if I'm out there. I say, can't you turn them off? And
Yeah,
he says, no, I like to have them, but that's the way that he works. And
yeah,
that's fair
yeah.
enough. But I'm totally with you on that. I have on Teams, I have minimal notifications as well. Not very many. I don't have as many channels as you. And I mute my WhatsApp groups. If I'm part of a WhatsApp group, I'll mute the group for 8 hours sometimes, or even for a week.
Yes. Yeah, if they're
So,
particularly busy, I will meet them for a week.
yeah.
Uh,
And then you're in control of when you go and look at the messages
yeah.
and catch up. And if it's something important. And in the olden days, when we didn't have the technology, it would take you 2 days to get a letter. Even an express letter would not be overnight, depending on where you live in the country. People can wait. It's just that we've trained people to expect an immediate response. We have to train them not to expect an immediate
Yes.
response.
I am a big believer in delay send, either via Outlook or on Boomerang. because sometimes it works for me to reply instantly. If I happen to be
Yeah.
in my email and I know the answer, it's much better for me, productivity wise, to reply there and then and get it off my list.
Yeah.
However, I don't necessarily want people thinking that I'm going to instantly reply to stuff that arrives in my inbox. So I just put a 2-hour delay on it.
Yeah.
Because,
That's a good tip.
yeah, VAs work differently than PAs. Obviously, there's different expectations. But certainly for VAs, we flit between clients.
Yeah.
And our clients have to understand that sometimes there is a little bit of lead time between when, because I do so little client work now, that one email might be the only thing I send in 3 days. So it's even more important that I'm not sitting here waiting for your emails so I can instantly reply. That's not my role in life. So let's train our clients to know that I will respond in a timely fashion, but it's not going to be right this very second. But I want it off my desk so it's gone.
Yeah. For example, I work Sundays because of where I live. It's a working day and most people don't. And I sometimes will do something in the evening. But I always say to a client, I'm answering this now because it suits me. I do not expect you to reply outside of your own working hours because it's not fair. And I work with a VA and I will sometimes send her things at 8 o'clock in the evening when it pops into my head of something I need her to do. But I never expect her to action that at 8 o'clock at night. And I'll often send her an email and I say, look, you can do this when you've got time. You don't have
Yeah.
to do it right now.
Yeah.
But
And that's entirely reasonable. We all have to get things off our head. I think where it becomes an issue for clients is particularly when they're using something like WhatsApp, when it's on somebody's personal phone and they're like, oh, I just wanted to get it off my chest at 9 o'clock in the evening on a Wednesday.
yeah.
So email it, don't WhatsApp it, because for me, WhatsApp is for life-threatening emergencies only. We have
Yeah.
to
That's how
train
I
clients.
that's how I got Zita and I working in teams because I got really fed up with Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, and email, never knowing where the message was and have I asked her to do something or did she reply to me and on which channel did we have that conversation? So now everything is in Teams. However, I only have the one person to talk to, so I'm not
Yeah.
inundated like you must be with
Yeah.
several clients or several projects that all have different WhatsApp Teams groups and Teams
Yeah.
channels and things.
Yeah.
But I think I've rabbited on and we've rabbited on probably for long enough. I can see the clock here ticking saying we've so far just going to hit the half-hour mark. And I think that's long enough to expect anybody to listen to me. So I'm going to say thank you, Kathy, so much for joining me. I have loved every minute of chatting with you. And remember to tune in to Virtually Amazing Assistants, the podcast for assistants everywhere. Share it with all your friends, family, aspiring VAs, PAs, EAs, anywhere. We have a mix of guests who will appeal across the board to VAs, EAs, and PAs. We've got some amazing guests lined up over the next few recording sessions. And I will have episodes scheduled right until May. I can't believe it.
Wow.
I can't believe it. And I'm going to be opening the doors to booking season 2 probably in the new year. So there will be more episodes to come, which is great. So thank you, Kathy, once again for joining me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Shelley. It's been gorgeous.
Thanks for listening. I'm going to see you next week with my next guest on the Virtually Amazing Assistants podcast. And that's me, Shelley Fishel, the MS Office Maestro, signing off for this week.